Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to arguably the biggest episode of this show yet. I'm Dennis, as always, coming to you from Greece. An honor to, as always, as of late, have Gav with me. How are you, man?
Good, how are you? Glad to be back.
Uh, I'm just fine. And I have the absolute honor to have with me Tito from the wonderful guys over at Viola Nation. Just introduce yourself, man.
Hey, I'm Tito. I'm the main editor at Viola Nation. I should probably even know how to say that after running it for all these years. We also do a podcast, and yeah, just a basic Fiorentina fan, banging around the states. How y'all doing, man? So nice of y'all to have me on.
Pleasure is all ours, man. Just you guys do wonderful work. The website especially is impressive, honestly.
Oh, thank you.
Uh, and yeah, just what a game we have in front of us. Huh.
Yeah.
What a game. Me and Gav had a small chat a few days ago about how you guys have done. Anything you wanna start off with, like generally?
Oh, just about Fiorentina's season so far. Uh, sure. Yeah, we could start with that. It's been very up and down, very confusing. A lot of emotional whiplash, I would say, just start to finish. I mean, I think the place to start obviously is the club president Joe Barone tragically died of a very sudden illness. Boy, it's already been a couple of months now, huh? And that feels like it's really sort of disrupted the season, and just a that's just a terrible thing. He was very young. I think he was 57. Uh, but beyond that, just talking about it in pure soccer terms, it has been chaos. The team has just been up and down, unable to find any real consistent form, I would say. Really still trying to figure some things out. But, it's somehow worked out. Fiorentina's in eighth place, a win against Napoli on Friday. Oh, that's tomorrow. Good gracious. Uh, can uh, can guarantee eighth place, which is going to be in the Conference League again next year, since Italy's getting an extra Champions League spot with the coefficient increasing.
Is that
So,
because of you guys qualifying the
uh,
fifth spot?
yeah, that's part of it. I think it's also in the Europa League with Roma coming through.
The
Yeah,
the
just
new coefficient rules, the top two European nations, they get a fifth Champions League spot for the next season. So Italy and I believe it's
It's
Germany
Germany.
uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
have
yeah,
have secured that already.
yeah. So Italy just passed up England in the coefficient, I think, last month, which has been a pretty big deal for those of us who are Fiorentina fans, I would say. So yeah, it's just been a really up and down season. It feels like everything's sort of coming to an end. Vincenzo Italiano, the coach for these past three seasons, is going to be leaving at the end of the season.
Is
And
that done and dusted?
I
Because
I think
the
so.
Greek media reported that if he wins, he stays. If he loses, he leaves. I don't know if that's true, but that's what's been written here.
I mean, these things can change so fast, and I have not spoken with Vincenzo Italiano or his camp, so I don't really know. Right. My understanding, talking to people around the club whose opinions I trust, is that he's done at the end of the season. It sounds like he's ready for a new challenge, and he's been the best Fiorentina coach since Vincenzo Montella's best or first run through back in the 10 years ago now. So I think the general consensus among supporters is thank you and best of luck going forward. So this this final really feels like his chance to leave the city of Florence with its first major trophy since 2001, I think, the Coppa Italia. So this is a really big deal for the whole club, especially after falling short last year in the most excruciating fashion imaginable.
It's history being made for both clubs, but it's a very different history for you and for us, safe to say. Of course, first uh, Greek European final since Panathinaikos back in the 70s, if I'm not
71.
mistaken. 71,
Wow.
yes. Uh, gonna be the first team, if we win it, gonna be the first team to bring a European title for Greek football at club level, of course. And yeah, just very, very historic game being treated incredibly by the city. As I told you before we started, there are going to be even projectors placed for the crowd just to watch it live. Uh, Greek TV channel will stream the game, of course, channel owned by Marinakis. But he managed to get the ability to stream the game for free to everyone.
Oh wow.
Uh, there are talks about there being a watch party at the Karaiskakis, but I can't confirm that just yet. I know the projectors will mainly be at Pasalimani and in general in Piraeus. So yeah, it's been treated like the final showdown, really, after. Because as you said, you guys have had an up and down year, and I think me and Gav understand that more than anybody. If you want to take over and just share the year we have had as a club.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny that you point that out because I don't think many teams have had a more up and down year than Olympiacos. What is Mendy Barrios, our third manager of the season or fourth?
If you count
Ridiculous.
Silaidopoulos, he's the fourth.
Technically the fourth. Had a few different sporting directors, so we have like this Frankenstein of a squad that's built by three different guys and four different managers. Obviously, the results themselves have been up and down. We struggled in the Europa League, finishing third in that group. Thankfully, we had a pretty poor Bachkotopola in our group, so we were able to finish above them and get into the Conference League. But ever since we've gotten our current manager, Jose Luis Mendilibar, it's been basically rocket takeoff, getting through the knockout rounds of the Conference League, only losing the two matches outside of really, I would say that first leg against Maccabi and the second leg against Fener, we were dominating pretty much every team we played. So it's interesting that both clubs kind of have that similar wacky trajectory all season long, and then like you said, to finish it off, just the stakes for both. We touched on that when we talked a few days ago with Fiorentina. The fact that you guys did play in the final last year and came this close, I think if you have another performance like that, you'd feel pretty good about your chances of winning this time. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out for you guys having just that experience. But Olympiacos have the advantage of this practically being a home game. So it's just all these different angles and layers. Like it's going to be fascinating to say the least.
Yeah,
It's also
I
safe
think
to say that. Go on. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just agreeing with Gav. I think there's so many different narratives in this game. I mean, being the age I am, I think for me one of the biggest ones is seeing Stefan Jovetic again, which is just makes my heart sing. I am so excited to see him, and inevitably have my heart broken by him scoring against Fiorentina in the 92nd minute to win it, because we all know that's what's going to happen, right? Oh God.
Hey, and if your media doesn't come out and call him a farmer like the Fenner media did, I think you'll be okay.
Farmer? Oh, for
they called him a seasonal cotton picker.
Yeah, word for word, a seasonal cotton picker, and they called Mendilibar a B-class coach.
Just to go 3-0 down in 60 minutes. It's crazy.
I mean, this is a thing I hate about so much of the. Sorry, we're I'm going to sidetrack this for a sec because I've got my little
Feel
soapbox, and
free.
I'll put it back
Feel
away
free.
here in a second. I swear. Is a fan of a team that's not one of the traditional big clubs, and is not. I mean, you know, I live in the U.S. Obviously, where the coverage tends to focus around the Premier League. Just the level of discourse on social media and even in like casual conversation with people, where there's this belief that if you're not playing for one of the 10 biggest clubs in the world, probably none of the players are good, everything's bad, everything's terrible, everyone's a farmer, which I don't know why we decided farmers are all terrible players as opposed to any other profession, but that's a whole nother thing. I just hate this so much. Like, just the willful ignorance of that position, I find incredibly distasteful. And so I'm genuinely thrilled that y'all beat Aston Villa and just demonstrated again, like, you know, the teams from these countries that people think of as minnows, you know, small countries, small teams. There's a lot of really good players. There's a lot of really smart managers doing really interesting things. And just because they're not on your television every weekend doesn't mean that they're bad. It means you're just not watching. Sorry, I just get so fed up with this narrative. I just find it the most frustrating, like, small-minded thing in the world. Sorry, I'm taking
We
my hands
couldn't
off the
agree
wheel
more.
now. Y'all can take it.
We could not
Exactly
agree
what
more.
I was about to say. Yeah, I think every single one of us agree, and I think every person with a sense of common logic agrees with that statement. Excuse my dog that's outside my door.
I'm glad the dog agrees too.
He's got something to say.
Exactly. But yeah, talking about Jovetic, I don't know if you saw, but he did come out and say that, of course, Fiorentina is the team that he has in his heart the most, and that, of course, he wouldn't celebrate even if he scored, as you said, the winning goal. And he said it's just going to be a very, very emotional match for him. Uh, of course, as things stand, we will extend his contract for next season, as far as I last heard at least. But he did say that he wants to come back at least someday to the club. That's about all I read about the stuff he said.
Yeah, that would be amazing. And given Fiorentina's transfer policy since Rocco Comiso bought the club, 5 years ago now? The focus on bringing back former Fiorentina players, I think Stefan Jovetic is certainly a candidate for that at some point. Yeah, I'm just so glad to see him thriving. He was, I think, maybe the first young player who really blossomed in Florence when I was able to start watching the club play regularly, you know, on extremely legal streams on the internet that were all commentated in Russian and Arabic, as I'm sure y'all have never done. So yeah, I think there's a real bond with Jovetic for fans around my age. So it's seeing him in a different shirt is going to be weird, but seeing him in a final is, I think, really just going to make all of us so happy and so excited for him.
Honestly, Mendilibar especially, because under don't even want to call him a manager, but under people like Carvalhal and under managers like Diego Martinez, he didn't really show. It's a similar case to Vicente Bora.
Might have lost him for a second.
I'm back. As I was saying, it's a similar case to Vicente Bora that's been a starter, especially in Europe for the last 2 games under Mendilibar, for the last few games under Mendilibar. He's just getting the absolute best of him. Best, I'd argue, we haven't seen since he played for City and for Fiorentina. He's, correct me if I'm wrong, but has he gotten injured under Mendilibar?
I don't think he's picked up anything major. Surprisingly, his health has been very good since he joined Olympiacos, which obviously, as you know, Tito, that's been the big thing that's nagged him his entire career is just the injury issues. But yeah, like Dennis was saying, just brain dead managers not giving him a real chance. And I think playing him out of position at times, we all know he can play as a striker, but his best position is definitely playing as a 10 or as a false nine behind an actual like our out and out center forward. So we have gotten to see that, and he has turned up. He scored a couple goals for us in the knockouts. He scored the winning goal against Maccabi, and the 2-0 up goal against Fener, which really sent us on our way. And again, that was a tie that was decided on penalties, so it's a huge goal. But yeah, he's been given the ability to flourish like Ibora, like a few other players we could mention under Mendilibar, and that's just been the biggest change for Olympiacos this season, going from the up and down to steady trajectory. We have an actual plan and actual identity, and it's great to see players like that being able to get involved.
And I think that's what's really interesting, just looking through the Olympiacos roster on Transfermarkt to me, is how many familiar names there are. Like anyone who's been playing FIFA or Football Manager over the past 10 years. I mean, like, here's Ruben Vezo, Gelson Martins, like all of these, I mean, Jovetic and Ibora, like all of these players who were tipped to be, the next star. And, maybe their careers haven't gone exactly as everyone expected, but they're still really good, technically gifted, athletic players. And
I bear you for Vezo. He's been horrid. I'm sorry, he's been so bad for us.
Ooh,
he's played like 2 games and done horribly in both. So
to be fair, I think he's the only one of that list that hasn't done well for Olympiacos. Yeah. Unfortunately, Gelson Martins isn't in our European list, so that might be another talking point for the both of us, because we kind of noticed similar things with Fiorentina, where you guys tend to play with a number of different players in Italy versus Europe. Olympiacos has the same sort of thing. Our reason is we signed so many players after the deadline that we couldn't register them like a Gelson Martins, like a Fran Navarro. So it's interesting to see that kind of difference between league and Europe. I don't know if maybe you want to speak to that in regards to Fiorentina, just like the differences that we'll see compared to Serie A and in the Conference League.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. In Fiorentina's case, it's because the squad is so shallow that the drop off in quality, it's just enormous. And Fiorentina, I think, realized probably over the past month or two that the Conference League is absolutely the priority. I mean, they've somehow managed to make their way back into 8th place, but I think since the start of 2024, maybe, they've taken 15 points in the league, which would put them in the relegation places. The Serie A has gone poorly, let's say. And so I think Italiano and his brain trust have pretty much punted on the league season. And so what that's meant is that he's really saved his starters for the cup competitions. So the Coppa Italia, which less said the better at this point, and also the Conference League. And so I think that's the main thing. For example, I think it was against Hellas Verona a couple weeks ago, ahead of the big payoff semifinal. He rotated 10 players for that game. Just left one central defender in. So I think that's sort of the policy. I think looking forward a little bit, I expect to see the starters against Napoli, because clinching 8th place, really big deal. As y'all know, the financial benefits of Europe are just incredible. And a club like Fiorentina that's been trying to self-finance under Comiso for the past several years, if they miss Europe, just financially, economically, they are doomed. So they got to make sure they get there, but I'm expecting Fiorentina's last game of the season is at Cagliari in Sardinia, and I think it's 3 or 4 days before the final. And I would be astonished if we see any of the regular starters start that game. I mean, part of it is that trip to Sardinia can be a little bit longer. It's Italy. It's not that far away. Gav, you're American. You understand how that works.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm expecting to see a lot more squad rotation against Cagliari, and then again against see all the starters come in again in Athens.
I did want to actually ask something about the league. It's what I said last episode as well. There is an Atalanta game shown after the final. What happened?
That game got postponed when Joe Barone collapsed in the team hotel about 3 hours before kickoff, right as they were leaving. And this is a club. Maybe y'all remember Davide Astori, the club captain, center back, died in his sleep in the team hotel in Udine a few years before that. And so, I mean, obviously having your club president collapse is a big deal, but I think for Fiorentina in particular, that memory is still so fresh. There's still a lot of people around the club who remember that. The players were just in no condition to play emotionally. I mean, these are human beings, right? Like seeing someone you work with every day. Like imagine going into the office and like your boss just collapses in front of you. That's going to mess you up pretty bad. You're going to be looking at your screen all day, but you're not going to be very productive, I would imagine. And I think it's the same trying to play a game. So that game was postponed. It actually wasn't rescheduled until a week or two ago, I think. And I think the whole plan here is that the league is hoping the way the standings shake out, they won't even have to bother playing this one. I mean, like I said, Fiorentina can guarantee 8th place with a win against Napoli. So then the Cagliari and then this makeup against Atalanta won't matter. For Atalanta, it's a bit more complicated. They're currently in 4th, I think. And Roma and Lazio are both within striking distance, and Atalanta could theoretically catch up to Juventus and Bologna as well. But the hope is it won't really matter. I'm expecting that to essentially be a dead rubber kind of game. I don't think anyone at Fiorentina is really going to care all that much, if I'm totally honest. Because it's either going to be, Fiorentina has won a cup final and everyone will be so hungover it doesn't matter, or Fiorentina will have lost a cup final and everyone will be so hungover it won't matter.
Moving on from that, I do want your opinion on 2 specific players that we focused on, especially one that me and Gav did talk about on Twitter today, and that is your captain, as far as I can say at least, Cristiano Biraghi and Dodo, your starting fullbacks who have been insane in Europe for what I have said.
Yeah, Cristiano Biraghi is a weirdly divisive figure in the fan base. A lot of fans just despise him for reasons I don't fully understand. He's not especially quick. He's prone to getting turned, especially in defense. He's not very strong as a defender sometimes, especially in his own box. But he's incredible going forward. He's an incredible striker of the ball. You've probably seen some of his highlights. He's a real threat as a free kick taker and a set piece specialist. He scored from inside his own half in a game last year off a quick free kick, which was pretty cool.
That's what terrifies me the most.
Yeah, he's a very good player, I think. Again, I think this weird social media instinct to put a player down so that you can gain some sort of social capital online is probably at the root of it. I think he's at worst a perfectly adequate player, and at best probably one of the 5 best left backs in Italy. I would say honestly, he's probably somewhere between.
Going to what we were talking about on Twitter this morning, the Conference League posted a graphic. He's the leader in completed crosses for this competition, and it's a pretty sizable margin.
It's by a landslide. Yes, yeah. I will go look for that.
I want to say it's about like 10 or 11 crosses over the next guy. So that was one of the things I picked up on just watching some of your knockout matches, is
Oh, I
him
believe
and
that. Yeah.
Dodo getting forward, just banging balls into the box because you guys like to really, from what I've noticed, crash the box with a lot of your forwards and even some of the midfield players. So from our perspective, I don't see why there would be any reason to dislike him as a Fiorentina fan because he seems like a very good player with Dodo as well.
He is. One more fun thing on Biragi about his crossing. I've written a couple of articles on this over the past few years. I think he's hit more crosses than like half the teams in Europe, like in the top 5 European leagues, just by himself over the past few years. Like it's just the fact that his leg hasn't fallen off from booting the ball into the middle of the box is incredible. He's just a bizarre statistical outlier in that way. Dodo, yeah, it's wild. Dodo is also really good. He's a very different kind of player. Biragi is more of a traditional left back. He wants to get forward, overlap, put the ball in. Dodo is, I don't know if I want to say more modern, but he does, the inverted fullback, whatever that means thing. He likes to cut inside, especially when building up from deep. He's extremely quick, and he'll just beat his man and get Fiorentina out of their third, break that first line of the press. Going forward in the final third, I think he's less decisive, but he's very active. He's very involved, and he can put in a good ball as well. The crossing actually is a little bit of a problem for Fiorentina, I would say. They've tended to play with a single striker, generally Andrea Belotti, who's works extremely hard, much to his credit. He's scored 2 goals for Fiorentina since coming from Rome in January on loan. There just aren't a lot of aerial targets, basically, is what I'm driving at here. So Fiorentina puts in a ton of crosses and frequently doesn't get much out of them. And I think, honestly, it's really unhelpful because they'll frequently cross the ball into maybe Belotti and one other player. And then, the ball gets cleared out and they'll recycle and do it again. And then they'll get bored of that and they'll crash the box with too many players. The ball gets cleared out and the other team counters the other way. So it's, I think that has been a real weakness for Fiorentina. There's been an inability to generate a lot of attacks through the middle. I think some of that is personnel based. I mean, Belotti, not super quick, not going to win a lot of foot races with opposing defenders. Malanzola, the backup who was signed to be a starter, has just had a terrible season. I feel bad for him. He's clearly suffering. He missed about a month dealing with personal issues, and he's only just getting back into the team. On a human level, I feel terrible for the guy. I think he's had a really rough year, but also he has not played very well at all. So yeah, I think the real question for me is if Fiorentina can generate enough attack against an opponent that it's in Olympiacos that is well disciplined defensively, knows how to defend its own box.
Sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah.
Debatable.
Yeah, it depends which version of Panos Retsos we get. He's like Two-Face from Batman. Either he's great like he was against Aston Villa, I think he was fantastic in both legs, or he gave away 2 penalties in consecutive games against Maccabi and Fener. So it's interesting that you point that out as a weakness. I mean, I guess that could also just be from us seeing limited run on Fiorentina. But as far as the crosses go, it could either go one of 2 ways from an Olympiacos perspective. We do have a very, very good center back in David Carmo, who is also like 6'5". So the hope from us will be that he can win some headers. But like I was just mentioning, Panos Retsos has kind of been up and down. And I could see those kind of second, third balls that Fiorentina sometimes gets creating issues for Olympiacos. So it'll just be interesting to see how that plays out from both sides, because I think that, as you mentioned, it could be a weakness for Fiorentina, but I think it could be a strength as well. And conversely, Olympiacos have the personnel and don't have the personnel to deal with that sort of play style. So it's an interesting matchup to say the least.
It is. That I think getting back to Biragi too. So sorry, Dennis, I'll let you go after this. Just one more thing.
Of course.
Fiorentina has scored more headed goals than any team in Serie A this year. A lot of that is set pieces. The rest of it is Nico Gonzalez, the left-footed right winger. And he's a really funny player to me because, he's very quick, Argentina international, left foot, plays on the right wing. You assume what he wants to do is start wide, cut in, and shoot. I don't think he scored a single goal from outside the box this year. I don't know if he's scored a single goal doing that this year. The way he scores his goals is because he's insanely good in the air. He's not especially tall, but he times his jumps really well, and he jumps so high. And by beating fullbacks at the back post and meeting particularly Biraghi crosses, I think that is probably Fiorentina's greatest attacking weapon. So whoever Olympiacos plays at left back is going to have a real handful on the back post in the air. And the fact that you're both reacting like that, I have to say, and I'm sorry, I know this is y'all's podcast, inspires a little bit of hope in me.
It should, because left back might be our weakest position.
Oh, no.
That's the funny thing, because I was going to go on to Nico Gonzalez, because as things stand, our starting left back will be a 20-year-old academy kid. We'll have 3 left backs out injured.
Or it'll be a 34-year-old Spanish right back.
Or it will
left
be
back.
Kini.
Yeah.
Granada's Kini.
He started against Villa and surprisingly played the game of his life. I don't think he could walk after the match because those old hamstrings and knee ligaments were probably screaming. But yeah, that's going to be tough for us. Nico Gonzalez, we did touch on him, very talented player. Pray to God that Francisco Ortega is back, or that
Omar Richards.
Or Omar Richards. But whoever's out there, pray for him.
I mean, hey, as a guy trying to play Sunday League still in my mid-30s, I feel that with the legs being done at the end of the game. So yeah, best of luck there. But to me, that's probably for Fiorentina going to be the most important one-on-one matchup.
That's very ironic. One more thing I wanted to touch on what you said. Actually, first, Biraghi has 29 crosses completed, and our player with the most is Fortunis with 18. So it is by 11, which is a landslide and a bit more. But yeah, another strength of yours, like you said, one of the biggest strengths you have as a team are the set pieces, especially with Biraghi. Once again, because I made this podcast to be as unbiased as I can and not just focus on the good things, that has been one of our weakest points for 3 years now. So that's going to be very interesting. And as Gav said, it is going to depend massively on the version of Rechos we get, because Carmo can't defend for 3 people at once. That's going to be something.
And I think it's worth pointing out, too, that Fiorentina's third leading scorer in the league this season, their top scorer is Nico Gonzalez. Their second top scorer is Giacomo Bonaventura. Their third top scorer is Lucas Martinez Cuarta, who is a center back. I've seen him described by sections of our fan base as a box-to-box center back, or possibly a number 10 center back, because I've never seen a player who is so thirsty to score goals. It's really funny. He will be crashing the box in open play, which can work sometimes and can also leave Fiorentina extremely exposed on the counter. But he's a real threat to score really at any time. Nikola Milenkovic has not had a good season, but he's simply enormous and a very good target at set pieces. And Luca Ranieri, the other center back who could start, is also a surprisingly dangerous option from set pieces. So I really think that's going to be a key battle area as well. I mean, yeah, it's really going to be Biraghi. His set piece delivery can frustrate sometimes, and Fiorentina tends to, from corners especially, really target that front post and look for flick-ons to the back post, which I think often leads to the, proper football man. Well, he can't even get it past the first man complaint, which, like, I don't know. If he keeps doing that and he's a professional, I'm willing to bet there's a reason for it. And it's not just because he can't kick the ball well enough. Like, what are we talking about here, guys? But yeah, I think that's really something to watch for. I would expect to see a lot of balls into that front post. The other option, especially on deeper free kicks, they'll go long, try to find Milenkovic isolated way, way back on the back post, and he'll head back across. So I would say those are the two to watch for on set pieces. If y'all are, have your bingo cards going.
I think that could be a strategy that really works against Olympiacos, because I think a lot of the goals that we have conceded, especially in Europe, it just tends to come from those second or third balls, or a ball that gets through a defender in the box. The second goal against Fenerbahce comes to mind, because I think that the marking, especially of whoever our left back is going to be, and Panos Retsos, who usually ends up playing on the left side of the pairing, they can be challenged in their marking at times. So that definitely could threaten Olympiacos, just from what I've seen recently. But it is interesting that you note Martinez Cuarta. We did touch on him as well. That's one of the things that's really, as I've watched some Fiorentina, that surprises me, is how cavalier they can be in getting players forward at times. I'll see two players standing on the halfway line, and everyone else is basically either in the box or on the edge of the box, and it's either going to work well in our favor for counterattacks, or it's going to be tough for us to get out. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because that could really be dangerous, but it could be an opportunity as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Italiano's system is based around defending really high up and cutting off the supply. When it works, it really works. It keeps Fiorentina in the driver's seat, keeps all the momentum with them. When it doesn't work, you get absolutely wild breakaways where it'll be like 4-on-2 with no purple shirt within 50 yards. I will also say Fiorentina's defenders just tend to sort of forget how to defend sometimes. I feel like this has happened at least once a game for the past, I don't know, 6 months. They give up terrible goals constantly. If you watch the highlights from the semifinal, you'll get to see plenty of examples of that. Same for the quarterfinal. They just concede stupid goals all the time. Just failures to close down, failures of marking. If a ball bounces in the midfield, that's pretty much it, because there's no one in there because everyone's getting forward. So I really expect to see y'all have a lot of chances that way. I think in this regard, Jovetic is actually going to be crucial in that he'll be in that number 10 spot. He's going to be making those runs off the main striker. He's going to be the one who's really keying those attacks, and I can't say that makes me feel great. But if I were y'all, I would feel good about it. We've been joking on the site recently about the Fiorentina tax, which is you start every game down 1-0 because you know your defense is going to do something idiotic, and I'm fully expecting that here.
We have the Panos Retsos tax, where he gives away a penalty every other game.
Yeah, I was going to say, sounds very Olympiacos-like.
Well, on the plus side, Fiorentina's been terrible from the spot, so he can probably give away that penalty and do okay.
All right, and our goalkeeper has shown a penance for saving them lately, so hopefully.
Oh, boy.
Genuinely may be the most unpredictable game of the season. Like in Europe in general.
Well, and I think part of that too, just like you mentioned with Fiorentina trying to kind of defend from the front, Olympiacos does the same exact thing. I think we do it a little differently. We don't tend to get as many players forward. But where you mentioned that there might be some personnel issues in the midfield, Olympiacos is stacked in that part of the field. That's easily where we're at our strongest. Like you mentioned with Jovetic, he may start, he might not. He might be a guy who comes off the bench, because we arguably have 4 or 5 players that you could make a genuine argument for they deserve to start final in midfield. and a lot of that might just come down to fitness and where everybody's at. But I think it'll just be interesting to see who blinks first, I guess, from the defensive standpoint, because obviously we know you guys have your players going forward who are very dangerous. We have Ayub Al-Kabi, who just became the third player to score 5 goals in a European semifinal. He makes a meal out of defenders not paying attention to him. His best skill, which you could see against Aston Villa, really.
He's perfect in runs. He's perfect in runs.
Four out of his 5 goals, excluding the penalty he scored, were just from him finding space, either making a run or the first goal at the Karaiskakis, getting loose. Pau Torres had no idea where he was. Luca Digne had no idea where he was. That's going to be our biggest focal point, I think. Just like you guys with Nico Gonzalez or maybe Belotti. I mean, I know he doesn't score a lot, but he makes a nuisance of himself. So I think that both these teams have very similar structure, makeup, how they like to play, and it seems like they have pretty much similar weaknesses and similar strengths. So it's just going to be interesting to see which one comes out on top of the day.
I want to build off of your point and add a player that will for sure start, because I don't know if you have seen Tito, but we have derby against Panathinaikos 10 days before the final or final game of the season. That does decide who goes into Europe next season, just in case we lose the final, who finishes third, who finishes fourth. And the player that's missing that game, so will be fully rested for the final, is arguably our best passer, I'd say, and the person that has been perfect in finding El Kabi with long crosses, and that's Chiquinho.
Oh boy. Yeah, that sorry, Gab, the way that you just described El Kabi right there, I'm not a betting man. If I were, I would go put everything I own on him scoring then right now. There is not a doubt in my mind. Just hearing you describe that. That's absolutely going to happen.
I think it'll really just come down to how well our press works. I think that's really where we can find a lot of our success. Like Dennis just mentioned, Chiquinho. He's one of the 4 or 5 players that should be starting in midfield. He will be, without a doubt. I think him and Santiago Eze, those 2 guys, they might have 8 lungs between them because they just cover every blade of grass. But yeah, I really think this is a game. Speaking of betting, man, like over 3.5, over 4.5. I think we're going to see goals from both teams. I could really see, like, if you look at some of Olympiacos' recent performances, I mean, we've played games with 7 goals, 6 goals. Like I think this has all the makings of an absolute bloodbath shootout. You know, maybe whoever can get to 4 goals first wins. I don't know. Maybe that'll be better for our nerves so we don't have to worry about extra time or penalties. But it's going to be. This sounds like it's going to be really fun, even more than I thought it would be. Just hearing you talk about Fiorentina.
Yeah, I think it is set to be a really interesting game. I think tactically and otherwise. I think also, I mean, Fiorentina, as y'all know, really wants to keep possession, control the game, and I'm really wondering with Olympiacos essentially playing in front of a friendly crowd, what impact that's going to have, if that's going to make the players want to be a little more expressive, keep the ball a little bit more, and pin Fiorentina back more. Because I think that could be really interesting, seeing these teams sort of trade momentum like that, take turns playing on the counter. I think we could see that. And I mean, you know, for a neutral, I think that's much funner to watch. For me, I'm going to have my heart in my mouth for 90 minutes. And I'm not really excited for it. But yeah, no, I think it is. I think it's shaping up to be a really good game. I will say Fiorentina has not played a lot of super high scoring games recently. So I think I would bet on something like I think I would go under 4 goals. If it's at 3.5, I might take the under there too, honestly. But also, I'll famously. Sorry, am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah,
I'm famously
really.
shit. Yeah, I'm famously shit at predictions. So I have no clue, man.
I don't like making them either. I predicted that Villa was going to beat us in the first leg, and we won by 2 clear goals. So I think I'm
Yeah.
retired from predicting games.
I
Yeah.
somehow underestimated us and said that the second leg would be 2-1. So I'm not amazing either. So we'll see.
But
I
yeah,
think it is interesting, like you mentioned, just to see how that plays out for Olympiacos as far as being in Athens. Dennis, I know you talked about it the other day. You saw something where Fiorentina, it seems like they might be coming up short on their allotment for tickets as far as people buying. Um, so I think it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Obviously, we know that the entire city is going to be flooded with people. There was a picture from UEFA today. They have the trophy set up in downtown Athens, and
That
there
was
looked
surely like 300-400 again total.
you couldn't even see the end of the line like that. And that's just to get a picture by the trophy. I hope nobody is expecting to drive in Athens or Piraeus on May 29th because it's going to be completely full. So I mean, I do think that's going to be a major advantage for Olympiacos. But again, as I mentioned kind of at the beginning, Fiorentina have been here before. So I think that's the advantage that they can lean on. And it seems like you guys have most of the same core from last season as well. So there's a lot of experience there. It's going to be interesting to see how that balances and which way it tips, because I think that you can make an argument that both teams have a very strong advantage intangibly coming into this game. Which one's going to win out? That's going to be what's really interesting to see.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Last I've seen, I think from this morning, 4,500 Fiorentina fans expected, which I mean, it's not a bad traveling contingent. I know a bunch of people who are going. Saw a really sweet story about a couple, I think in their 80s, a couple of Florentines whose sons bought them tickets on the boat over and hotels, and they're going to be in the stadium. They've never seen Fiorentina outside of Tuscany, so that was just really sweet and cute, and like, I mean, that's the best part of this kind of game, right? Is you get all of these fun stories about people getting to do things they wouldn't otherwise ever get to do, like me getting to talk to y'all on a podcast about Greek soccer. Like, never would have thought I'd be here. So yeah, I don't know, man. I'm just really excited for it. I think this is so fun and it's so good.
It's incredible, and this is the beauty of the Conference League. I know a lot of people. I don't know if I was talking to Dennis about this earlier. Kind of have that perception that it's like this third-rate competition that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, you were.
And I can't believe that. Hearing stories like that, seeing teams like Fiorentina, Olympiacos, even last season, West Ham, teams that would never have an opportunity to play in a European final otherwise, getting to be on this stage, I think is massive. I think I saw a similar thing to the story that you brought up for Olympiacos. Dennis, I don't know if you saw this. I don't know if this is true or not, but I saw somebody tweet something about how the 49 fans who traveled with Olympiacos to Bachka Topola when we were down 4-1 to Maccabi,
I retweeted
watched us win the second leg 6-1. Apparently the club bought them all tickets to the final, so they'll be there. From what I saw,
they'll have priority over everybody to take it, so theirs is more or less secured.
Oh, that's great.
Which is incredible. It's great to see that both clubs are getting to have those sorts of, getting down to the community, because that's really what it's about. And it seems like Fiorentina are the same way as Olympiacos, where the fans are a massive, massive, massive part of our club. Without Gate 7 and the ultras and everyone in between, Olympiacos would not be able to achieve a lot of the results it achieves in Europe. So it's great that both of these communities really get to enjoy this spectacle, and I think both clubs really deserve it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I'm seeing the listener question pop in here now.
Yeah,
And,
that's why I put that up. It's a very interesting question, actually.
I mean, fortunately, Fiorentina has a lot of experience losing European finals. Uh, I mean, the second Champions League ever, Fiorentina was in it. Famously lost to Real Madrid on an extremely shady penalty call. You can go back and watch the hilariously grainy footage
I
on
remember.
YouTube.
I remember. Yeah.
And then, yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. Fiorentina, I feel like is sort of an always an almost club. You know, hasn't won anything since 2001, despite having all of these incredibly charismatic players, mostly attackers who score lots of goals. I mean, Baggio, Batistuta, Adrian Mutu. I remain a huge Adrian Mutu fetishist. Uh, Vlahovic and Chiesa more recently. They just churn out these really fun attacking teams regularly. And something always goes wrong, no matter what, usually in the most catastrophic way possible. And I mean, this is the pain of being a Fiorentina fan. Is ahead of a game like this, you get yourself excited, you get yourself ready, you let yourself hope, and then someone comes in and crushes that with a sledgehammer, and you are brought back to the reality in which you and Fiorentina both exist as just hopeless, basically. And I'm so excited to be right back at the start of this cycle.
Again, very Olympiacos like, especially the last few years. I did want to ask about. I wasn't planning on asking this, but the rumor just got brought up to me. Uh, Fiorentina is apparently the favorites to sign Greek goalkeeper that was recently signed by Lazio, Christos Mandas. Do you know if that stands? Anything about that?
I haven't heard anything about it. I also usually don't really follow transfer rumors that closely, especially while the window is closed, just because I mean it's just people. Well, for want of a better word, it's people lying.
You can cares freely. Don't worry.
Yeah, sorry, I got nothing there. I do think Fiorentina is going to be in the market for a goalkeeper this summer. They've been trying to sign a new goalkeeper at least once a transfer window for the past couple of years, and things just keep not working out. So Pietro Terracciano keeps on suiting up, popping out with the gloves. But I think that's just going to be, yeah, I would expect to hear more goalkeeper rumors. But also, I think the whole squad's going to get blown up this summer, and we're going to see a lot of exits, a lot of entrances with Italiano leaving, with Barone no longer with us. The club's long-term vision, I think, is probably going to shake up considerably, and that's going to lead to a lot of roster churn.
I mean, I think I've said this a record time in this podcast, but it's exactly the same for us. Mendilibar came in after the January transfer window, so what he's done is even more incredible, at least in our eyes, because none of the players he has are his. He's worked with some of them before, some in Sevilla, some, for example, Ibora. But none of the players are his. He's created a unit and he's exploited the best out of everyone that's not his players. And standing on some things he said today, he openly admitted that the squad has a lot of players, too many players, and he's definitely gonna cut at least 10 of them, as he said. Uh, and I wanted to say something else. Very, very similar to what you have said. There has been a massive change. There has been a massive change in the club's vision with the academy lifting the youth league. I don't know if you saw anything about that. So a bunch of those players are gonna come up and fill a lot of spots that we are deeply hurting in, with a main one being the centre back position. And that's the first time that Olympiacos will have done that since I can remember watching this club. How is Fiorentina with the academy, more or less?
The Fiorentina Academy has been good recently. They've won the Coppa Italia Primavera, the U19 domestic cup, I think 6 times in the past 7 years or something. Yeah, no, it's absolutely bizarre. They've produced some players who look like they might break through into the senior team in the past couple of years. I mean, obviously, guys like Federico Chiesa is probably the highlight of the academy in recent years, but it's produced a bunch of other pros. Gianluca Mancini, who's going to be going to who's going to be in Italy's Euro squad as an academy graduate. Federico Bernardeschi as well, who was a good player. There's a couple current players on there. Luca Ranieri, I think, is probably the standout. But yeah, I think there's a couple of young guys who I'm vaguely excited about. I don't think there's anyone who's going to reach, Chiesa levels, but I think there's probably a couple of interesting squad players. And I think similar to y'all, we're going to see probably quite a bit more of them next year. I mean, yeah, I'm just really taken by how similar these clubs are. I feel like we need to set up some kind of gemelaggio, a twinning between the clubs where the supporters are super friendly. Because I mean, it's like the Spider-Man meme, right? Like we're just kind of pointing at
each other.
Yeah.
It's very interesting indeed. And as you said, gonna be an extremely good game for the neutrals, but will be with our hearts in our mouths. So,
Yeah, man.
Gav, you have to go, don't you?
Yeah, I have about an hour for my lunch, so I'm getting to the end of that. So I'm gonna have to hop off here in a minute. But it was great joining you guys, Tito. Great to meet you. Hopefully, we can get on for another show with you guys. It sounds like we could talk for another 2 or 3 hours, and then
Definitely.
maybe I'll see you next week in Seattle.
Yeah, hey man, you know where to find me. Hit me up. I'm around.
For sure. All right, thank you guys. Have a good one.
Hey, take care.
I leave you with one final question. Where do you think the club is headed next season? Like, do you think it will be up, or do you think it will be like the same? Because you said there will be a massive shake-up.
Yeah, I think. I think the club wants to continue competing in Europe. I mean, the problem is, well, I guess there's a couple of problems here. Not a lot of saleable assets. I mean, Nico Gonzalez is probably a 50 million euro player, I would guess. He's signed with in Florence through I think like the 2027 maybe. But other than that, I don't. Oh, excuse me. I don't think there's a lot of other guys who will make the club a lot of money. And since the club is self-financing over the past few years, the owner Rocco Comiso built a state-of-the-art training facility that opened this past year that he's very proud of and that he's put a lot of money into. But I don't think he's as interested in fixing the club at this point. I think he's more interested in the infrastructure, which I think, from a purely capitalist standpoint, probably smart. But the downside is that I'm worried this won't be as sustainable. I mean, I think a lot of it will depend on who Fiorentina gets in as manager. Right now, it sounds like it's going to be Alberto Aquilani.
I did talk about that, so that stands because he did come out and say that he will be talking to Pisa and see what happens after the final game.
Yeah, and I think that, Fiorentina's penchant for bringing in guys who have a history at the club is going to be overwhelming there. They've already struck out, it sounds like, on Alberto Gilardino. So I think Aquilani's probably the next one up. I'm not crazy about the idea. He's done a good job at Pisa, and he did a great job with the Primavera for, 3 years, I think. But Pisa is his first senior position. He's got them solidly mid-table in Serie B, but also there's, how would you say, a mild rivalry between the cities of Pisa and Florence. I mean, there's the the Florentine saying that translates to better a death in the house than a peace in at the door. So I think that could, yeah, maybe I'm just being a little provincial here, but that just feels like a bad idea to me.
I mean, that's my connection really doesn't want to work today. I'm back. That's what football is mostly, like, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Especially watching the Super League since I was 8. I'm 20 now. I've seen all kinds of things like that. Of course, the rivalry well known is against Panathinaikos, but especially Olympiacos and PAOK are two teams that have been very head to head the last few years. The two main teams that have been successful in Europe also for Greece. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see, I suppose.
But yeah, sorry to
So,
answer your original question. Yeah, I think I could see Fiorentina probably taking a step back next year. I wouldn't be surprised. Just going to have a lot of new players, probably bringing in some younger players through the academy. So I wouldn't be shocked if they finished, 10th or so next year. I think that would disappoint a lot of people at the club, which I think speaks to the lack of a real cohesive vision at the top. But I've been wrong before. I would love to be wrong about this. I'd love to see them take this season and springboard on into greater success. I'm just not really conditioned to expect that, I guess, as a fan and observer of this club for the past few years.
do you think the focus will be, say, of course, you guys make it to the Conference League again? Well, or on one side, I want to say maybe you make it to the Europa League. On the other, I don't want to mention it. But say you make it to a European competition, do you think you will put full focus there again because of the cash coming in as well, or do you think it will be more balanced?
I think it'll be more balanced. I think what I expect them to do next year is compete on as many fronts as they can for as long as they can. And then once one of them goes pear-shaped, let's say, once it goes wrong, probably stop focusing on it as much. But
Yeah.
I mean, this being Fiorentina, that could be all 3 competitions by October. So who knows? Dennis, I have no clue, man.
I feel you, especially with how things have gone since last year, especially, but football-wise, purely since 2021, I understand massively. I don't know if you've seen anything about our recent history, but Europe has been very shaky per se. With it all starting 2 years ago with that 1-4 loss against Maccabi Haifa that sent I will go into that insane stat that I wanted, that sent Pedro Martins, who has been our longest serving manager, out the window. And since then, we've been through, pretty sure that we've been through 8 managers and 75 plus players in 2 years. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I think our clubs are very, very, even more similar than I thought while doing research on everything.
Man, I mean, the fact that y'all are still competing at the level you are, despite that kind of chaos, I think really speaks well of, of the players, of a lot of the people who've come into the club. But good Lord, that's insane. That is a crazy, holy smokes, dude. Yikes. Okay. Yeah, I gotta say, it has not been quite that chaotic in Florence, although, maybe this summer kicks it off for us, and that's a good little preview.
I couldn't wish that on my worst fucking rival. Never, never, absolutely never. Just so we slowly